Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 9.11. Of course, we're playing as Germany, and this should be an exciting episode, so don't just go on because I think we're going to be starting the war if all things go well. Now, I want to sort of, pause here a little bit and talk a little bit about this momentous time. And I've recently been reading War in the West by James Holland. More of a, or had been more of a novelist that was writing history, but he, as he says in the preface of his book, something about, to get the historical details right for his novels that he wanted to tell, he needed to start researching, so he ended up writing this book. And it's a general survey work, but it's very well done, and done very well in the sense that it's telling a good story. You definitely find that better than a standard history book. Sure, it's leaving out a lot of important things, but it's covering a lot of important things as well. But it's often doing it from a personal perspective of a German bomber pilot, a German submariner, or a Dutch soldier, a British soldier being sent up to Norway or whatever. So it's telling the story, and he's both telling the overall thing as well as telling the lower level stories, and he's also dealing with stuff that's people that were involved at the high level. And this sort of gets to what happened back in 39, but is sort of happening now for us, is Hitler and the start of the war. It's a critical period. James Holland is also known for being one of the few people, I would say, with credibility on the TV show Hunting Hitler. That's as a face is where I first encountered him, and you can tell from some of the stuff, he's not the greatest expert on some of the stuff in detail, and that's fine. But that doesn't mean he can't write a good book and tell a good story with this stuff. But it just going over this, it's fresh in my mind, and known a lot of this before. But it's sort of a, and some of it is covered already previously in Third Reich Events for Hearts of Iron 4. The British and the French sent a mission to the Soviet Union to see if they could develop an alliance with, with the Soviet Union against an expanding Germany. At the same time, unbeknownst to them, Ribbentrop is in Moscow negotiating the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. So both sides of the upcoming war are trying to get the Soviets on their side. And that's sort of an important element, is getting the Soviets on their side. And part of the, how shall I put this? Thing is that with Germany, they did get the Soviets on their side for a while because the Soviet Union invaded and took half of Poland approximately. Now, the big sticking point for the Soviets, at least claimed, and this is what the delegates that were in Russia at the time, I keep going back and forth between Russia as a geographical location, the Soviet Union as a political entity, but that were there at the time, the Soviets claimed that they wanted to be able to have, if there was a war with Germany, that Poland would let them come across into Poland to be able to fight the Germans and move to protect Poland. The Poles absolutely just flat out refused this. And I think rightfully so, because as we see when the Soviet Union occupies the Baltic states, tries to demand territory from Finland, demands territory from Romania. They just really want to grab territory. Now, whether... Well, no, I think Stalin, if there was going to be a flat-out war with the Germans, at the end of that war, Poland was going to end up being part of Soviet territory as sort of the price of that war. So Poland wasn't willing to do this, and the Soviets got a better offer was of, well, you get half of Poland, and we'll let you have Estonia and Latvia. Lithuania was going to be in the German sphere. That changed when they renegotiated things after the end of the excuse me here. After the end of the sort of war with Poland, to give more territory to Germany, and the Soviets got to have Lithuania in their sphere, with a somewhat general understanding, and this really pissed off people like Mussolini and others, that Finland and whatnot was going to be in the Soviet sphere in a way too. I really do believe that if Finland hadn't resisted giving up the territory that the Soviets demanded, there would have been a second set of demands and a third set of demands that would have erased Finland as well. So you have this situation in which, again, both sides are trying to get the Soviet Union as a counterbalance to the perceived coming of war with Germany. Stalin, of course, makes the worst deal of the two. Also, there's other things like, well, how many divisions is Britain going to be able to contribute to this? And how many, and I do believe that contribution would have been sending them to the Soviet Union and fighting on the Eastern Front. It was something like 4 divisions. And the reason I'm saying that it was that side, because I know Britain had a lot more than 4 divisions that went into the BEF and whatnot. So it was just what they were sort of able to contribute. And it was going to be just too little, as they saw it. Because, again, the Soviets, Russians, or maybe I should say, are a continental power, and thinking continental and land power terms, where the British Navy says, should have just said, well, what are we going to contribute? The Royal Navy. Or, well, no, the Royal Navy does not help you march across Poland, but it does control the seas of the world, which is a hugely important factor, and has the ability to, deliver supplies up to Murmansk or some other place, and not just deliver supplies, but protect the supplies being delivered. So I guess you could throw in the British Merchant Marine in as well. So Stalin goes with this short-sighted plan and makes a deal with a power that has repeatedly stated that it's going to be moving east. And also has repeatedly said that it is that it is anti-communist, the movement from the earliest days, even though there is a red element within National Socialism at various levels. They are still anti-communist, and that's, as I've come to understand more and more, the least important element of National Socialism is its economic program. So it's not that they didn't like, and that Hitler and the upper Nazis didn't like the leveling aspect. I don't know if many of you know what levelers are. Levelers are people that want equality for everyone. And that means equality of outcome, meaning no one could have a bigger house than anybody else. No one could have more farmland than the next person. They're not necessarily communist in that it's all owned by the state, levelers. But levelers believe that in social and monetary and other pure equalities, everybody is equal, and everyone has to have not just equal opportunity that we believe in America, but a equal outcome. So every factory worker and every factory manager will make the same as the lowest factory worker. No one will make any more than anybody else. The National Socialists did not believe in this communistic element of leveling, but that isn't their major concern. Their major concern with communism is its internationalism, as opposed to, thank you for driving by, supreme ultra-nationalism, if you will, to the racist, Aryanist type elements within National Socialist Germany. That's some of their major conflicts from the start with them. So the Soviets knew that at its core, even if it was going to be temporary, and sort of Stalin thought it was going to be temporary to some degree, I think, too. Temporary, but longer temporary than it turned out to be. Meaning, I thought I'm guessing he probably thought he had 10 or 5 years at a minimum, 10 years or something before the real outbreak of the war between the Soviets and the Germans. And he thought by that time the Soviet Union, being much larger, much more resources, was going to be able to be much more powerful in time than the Germans and win that. But he makes this bad deal, because had he not made the deal with the Germans are worried that the Soviets may still, come into Poland, but with the intention of hostilely confronting German aggression. And that is something that Germany is just unprepared to deal with, a war with the Soviets. It's just completely unprepared to deal with. And they sort of know that they are unprepared to deal with a war with France as well. And this gets to some of the other things, is that Goering, and I've talked about earlier that I found out about his sort of listening network of information gathering. But there also, Goering was talking with, I forget, the British ambassador or something, about the idea of what, he had several industrialists, I think it was, British industrialists that he talked to, and was trying to find out whether Britain was going to go to war over Poland. And basically he was getting silence from the British delegate, where he was hoping for an answer, yes, no. One, I think the people that he was talking to had no ability to set policy, and so Goering was worried a little bit about the West's reaction, a bit more than Hitler. Hitler truly believed, after his occupation of the Saarland, or kicking out of the last of the French, if you will, occupation of the Saarland, reoccupation of the Rhineland militarily, not just because the Saarland, if I get it all, was sort of administered by the French via the League of Nations mandate, or something sort of like the Free City of Danzig, the Free City or whatever of Tangiers, which is here. Because that, up until about the day that Germany gets into Paris, is when, because this should be a free city as well, Franco marches in unopposed into Tangiers, but it's a League of Nations free city, as well as other things I'm not coming up with in my head right now. It was sort of one of those sort of League of Nations, French sort of administered things. So getting the Saarland being unopposed, getting the Rhineland unopposed, militarily invading, though peacefully, Austria. By that time, the Austrians were just had given up. And then we have the situation here with Sudetenland. And then, not only did they not fight over the Sudetenland, they didn't fight over taking out the rest of Czechoslovakia. So Hitler believes that these two guys aren't going to be fighting over Poland. And he's going to take that gamble, because Hitler is sort of a supreme gambler. And as I continue to study both Hitler and Mussolini, I don't know that much, and there's not as much written about Stalin, because it's a much more closed society than Germany and Italy, even, for the time period. So, both Mussolini and Hitler a lot of times got their way by sheer acts of will. In politics, you can get your way by sheer acts of will. Because you will it so, it will happen. So that you can overawe, you can just be steadfast, or you can just go out and get a lot of perceived, whether it's real or not, popular support, meaning you can get huge cheering crowds, though that may be, you can, fill 1 million people into the streets or something. There could still be 5 million people who oppose you, not in the streets, and it appears that everyone's behind you. So through, or with political situations, especially ones in which the sort of realms that you control, your nation state, your province, your city, your whatever, you can get things by sheer acts of will. And Mussolini was also doing some of this as well as Hitler. But what happens is once you find out that you can do this, you have a personality and a situation, Mussolini or Hitler, you start to believe two other things with this. One, since diplomatically or internationally with other nation states, through sheer acts of will, you can achieve the same thing. Well, people living in Britain aren't necessarily going to be overwhelmed by, and political leaders and others aren't going to be overwhelmed by Germany's sheer act of will. You can argue, and I think correctly, that Austria is part of the greater German nation, whether it should or shouldn't be its own state. Now, as time goes on and as its continued separation from the rest of Germany, it may end up being a new sub-nation. I don't think it's achieved that yet, but it's maybe moving towards that. So, but Hitler thought he could sort of continue to do this on others, and reality doesn't bend to your acts, your will. And the other reality that doesn't bend is physical reality. Just because you demand X levels of productions of this type of arms, or this amount of food growth, or whatever, just because you will it to happen, doesn't mean that you'll end up getting that level of food production or arms production. You can certainly motivate people to attempt that within your sphere of influences, a factory increasing the working hours, say, or other sorts of means of that, or people planting more crops. Doesn't mean that you say we're going to double food production in 1 year, that the actual outcome is doubling food production just because of the leader's will, as well as maybe the great majority of farmers' will, because they just may not have the ability to get land into productive use in that amount of time. So these are where reality for both Mussolini and Hitler, physical reality, does not bend to their acts of will. And so this fails. So this is more at this moment a political act of will, or a diplomatic act of will, that Hitler is believing that his decisiveness will show the West, who's dithering, and the West is dithering. They dithered over, not over Austria, because most of the rest of the world thought, whatever, the Germans are working their own thing out. They did sort of dither over Rhineland militarization. Had the French just moved something to confront the Germans would have backed down. They dithered very much over Czechoslovakia. So, but dithering just means that you're indecisive, doesn't mean that at some point they won't come to a decision, or within their own political systems be forced into a decision. And so Hitler thinks that his decisive action is going to put a fait accompli on the table. That means an already settled fact, meaning, oh, once I'm in, Warsaw and all this Polish army is defeated, what are the West going to do about it? They're not going to continue to, oppose me. Well, he was wrong. He gambled, he was wrong. Hitler was a big supreme gambler in these kind of terms, because he had done so at various points in his life. He's failed miserably with the Revolverheld Putsch. That was a complete cock-up. But the trial after it, he turns it into a success. And he even sort of turns in the sort of away from the stage for a while, being in Landsberg prison, where he had a room to himself. Rudolf Hess was in the next room. Rudolf Hess has a shorter sentence than Hitler. Rudolf Hess stays in prison with Hitler after his sentence up to continue to be his aide in writing Mein Kampf. So, it's not that, if you're offered out of prison, but nah, hey, my boss is still in prison, I'll just hang out with him in prison as well. I think I have that detail right. But I do know he was the sort of main sort of, I don't know, secretary or whatever, taking down Hitler's Mein Kampf and turning it into a usable piece. I think there were other editors as well before it was published, but one of the sort of first sort of editors of Mein Kampf, Hitler. So so he does fail with the Revolverheld Putsch and as a setback, but that trial gets him national attention outside of Bavaria, and while he's away from the stage, he uses it to write the book. That book is a critical factor in Hitler's rise to power. Maybe not so much that people really read it, but it is much more that it was a source of income. Huge amounts of people bought the thing. So that was Hitler's primary source of private income. He got little or no money for being Chancellor and then the Fuhrer. Hitler, you can look at the corruption of Goering, and some people have overstated some of that, but he was a corrupt person who got rich off of being a political figure. Hitler was a very sort of aesthetic person, very sort of, sort of a monk-like thing. The reason he was able to build, or have built for him, his sort of Berghof residence and all of that, was from the proceeds of Mein Kampf. And what happens with that is once he, at some stage after he gets into power, the government now buys a copy of Mein Kampf to give to every married couple as a gift from the government. So the government is buying it from Hitler's account, or personal, private stuff, and then at the going market rate, and then handing them out to couples as they get married. So having the state buy large numbers, I don't want to overstate numbers, but very large numbers of the book and handing them out is a source of income for Hitler that was rather publicly known. It wasn't some sort of, shenanigan or something. It was just, the state's going to give, every married couple. I don't think most of them even opened the damn book, but, handing it out as part of the You're Getting Married kit. And that's sort of Hitler's primary source of income. And, of course, all of his travel as the Fuhrer and all, having the America train, which is a really nice train, and all those guards and the Reich Chancellery and all that, all the Fuhrer bunkers and all of those staffs and all of the food, that's just all coming out of the German state budget. So when he's running around for his job, which, now, if you don't know this, the United States president, and this is something that often presidents find out sort of to their shock, literal shock, when they become president. They have to pay for their own food. They don't get any food in that White House that isn't paid for by them. They have to pay for and there's an account book, and it comes out of their bank account, whether it's out of their pay or if they have other, because a lot of, Trump we can talk about with his, huge empire of businesses, but other presidents have had, large stock portfolios and other things that they normally put into a blind trust. So they don't know what the trustee is doing with the stock, but they can tap, money from it as they need to. But all the food in the White House comes for the president and his family out of their own account. Now, if they have a guest over, whether it's a senator or an ambassador or a king or a queen or a person off the street, that food to the White House, that food is paid for by the government. And they actually keep track of how many eggs are used for the guest for the meal and how many eggs are used for the president and or his family for that meal. Staff has to provide their own, unless they're formally invited to an official White House function, a big sort of, ambassadors meeting or whatever. The staff has to provide their own food. It doesn't come out of the, from the kitchens that are working in the White House. But so if there's, but if if the president were to invite, some person, well, I'll just name this pop in Joe the plumber, because he's talking plumbing issues, and hey, come and have a like the beer summit for that Obama had. Theoretically, and I don't know for the beer summit, but theoretically the beer for the guests can come out of the government funds, because they are being hosted by the president in the official national residence. But the president's beer needs to come out of his budget, private budget, not from the government. So that's sort of an interesting little fact on the U.S. So the U.S. presidency does not have a food budget system set up for itself. But of course, Hitler is being paid for doing all that kind of stuff. I don't know about the budget system for food in the Berghof, but all the buildings, because there's his building, he buys up a lot of the land around it. Actually, sort of Martin Bormann is doing it for him and sort of expanding this complex. Hitler's not disagreeing, but I don't think he's paying much attention to it. But all that money for buying up all of this and doing all of the work is coming out of Hitler's private means from sales of Mein Kampf. Just an interesting little fact. So, and yes, I know, like I said, if this goes well, we'll get to the thing, but I want to talk a little bit more. So, about the setting up of World War II. So, Hitler believes that the Soviets are not going to trouble him. So, he's not worried about a war with the Soviets, and he's giving up basically half of Poland to get that. And he believes that they will make noises, they will have diplomatic stuff, they will maybe, put, some sort of embargoes, but not necessarily blockades, meaning not necessarily like sinking ships or attacking ships going in and out of German ports, but putting an embargo from any British or Commonwealth nation trading with Germany and France or something like that. He may believe that those kinds of things are going to happen to him. He truly does not believe that the Western powers are going to go to war over Poland. So this is a mistake on Hitler's part, a big mistake on Hitler's part. Now, once this happens, Hitler sort of takes the attitude, well, good, we're going to have this war with the Western powers. Now, why does he have that? And this is just, again, my purely belief. Why does he have this well, good attitude? And you can look in multiple books that he sort of does have this well, good attitude. You could just say that he's making a brave face on now the situation is. I truly believe that, and I've come to understand, Hitler is a belief in a higher power. One book that I may try to get and read that wants to talk about that nature is Hitler's God, and this is sort of a Darwinian view of nature, and I, because the little blurb about the book is that atheists want to call Hitler a Christian and sort of do that, and Christians want to call him an atheist. Well, I really believe, and I probably will get this book at some point, is that Hitler very much believes in a higher power, because he is constantly under assassination attempts. And some are close calls, some are very close calls, the Stauffenberg, the Wolf Slayer, wherever the Wolf Slayer is out here. Or is it out here more? It's out here more. That the sort of big final attempt on his life. But there are constantly plots and plans and assassins being sent, and the Beerhawk Keller, there's a bomb planted in a pillar or something, and it goes off, but Hitler is late arriving, or I'm going to make an event about it someday, but I have to look it up. And when I make an event, I look up the history, where I'm just now talking off the top of my head. So there's all these, near misses with Hitler. So Hitler truly believes that there's some sort of power, not just the random nature of Darwinism, but there's some sort of power looking out for him. So Hitler, and so he'll interpret the beer hall putsch now in Munich, that its failure was meant to be because had he taken over the Bavarian government, either he would have broken off and created his own Bavarian state, which would have limited things, or it would have just ultimately screwed up his chance to becoming Führer of Germany. So I think he looks at it as that is a divine failure because it leads to him becoming the Führer. So I believe he takes this idea that this divine power. Oh, and there's things like when they decide that they're going into Poland and they're going to go for it, that evening at the Berghof, they go out and they can see the Aurora Borealis, which is sort of rare for that far south. That's the Northern Lights. And their faces and hands are, and this is from multiple sources, on that night, are bathed in red light. And, they make some comments about it. And so he really is a mystic. Hitler is a mystic and believes that there's this higher power. I don't know that he buys into all of the Norse religion elements or some of these other occultist elements. I think he's sort of, and there's pre-war evidence that in Vienna he was interested in some of the extremist Austrian, German-based occultist, but extreme right-wing elements before the First World War, because obviously he's in Munich or whatever when the First World War breaks out. So he has this connection to this Aristophanacy, this Arianism, and what. So he has that. I don't know that it's settled on any one sort of, Guido von List or whoever, one sort of viewpoint, but he does have this belief in this higher power that is looking out after him and is guiding his destiny and the destiny of Germany. So I think once it becomes that you're at war with the Western powers, it was meant to be, and since it's meant to be, it's meant that he will win and crush them. So Hitler takes this this viewpoint that now that we're at war, we must crush the Western powers. We cannot have a negotiated peace. Where Chamberlain, sitting over here in London, views Hitler through his own perspective, because Chamberlain is a reasonable man. He believes Hitler is a reasonable man. Chamber is a gentleman. I don't know that he believes Hitler is a gentleman, but he sort of kind of believes that something can sort of kind of be negotiated out. He's still viewing, even with the invasion of Poland, even with some of this other stuff, that maybe something could be worked out. And this isn't going to have to end in one country or the other country being completely destroyed. This is a mistaken viewpoint. Hitler is believing that, and obviously he does crush France. We know that. Now that's very much, in my opinion, is because French society and the French army, including the French army within the army, they're more worried about internal rivalries than they're worried about Germany. And part of that is, I'll just say, overconfidence, either in the effectiveness of the I wish I could do this so easy. The Maginot Line, the overconfidence there, or just simply the overconfidence in the French army, but we'll get into some of that later on. The French Air Force believes it's much smaller than the German Air Force, when in fact the French Air Force alone is about equal in size and equal in modernity to the German Air Force. That's without the RAF. And the Italian Air Force, although big-ish, I don't want to overstate that. A lot of it is really out of date by late 1939, early 40, with what the current levels of aircraft. So they've got lots of aircraft, but a lot of them are rather old, and also the serviceable levels of a lot of the Italian aircraft aren't all ready to go flying all at once. Not that they're necessarily falling apart aircraft, but they need maintenance and spare parts much more, and they don't have enough maintenance personnel or spare parts to get them all flying all on one day. So sheer size of air power is a factor, but it's modernness. It's how much can operate at any one time, whether that's pilots or fuel or just simply maintenance levels to safely get them up in the air and fly and come back without any sort of dangers of combat. So France is in some ways more powerful than they think, in other ways not as powerful, and the French thinking also, part of that is victory disease. They think they're going to be facing a war in which they're going to have time to make decisions, and they can make the deliberate decisions, but they're also infighting amongst themselves, and that's largely, and this is sort of because I've been involved in it, whether the developers or mod makers or whoever is balanced, is how to give a very, very large French army. When I recently did that Hearts of Iron 4 series, French Follies, I had trouble getting small arms for my French army when, in fact, they have more small arms than they know what to do with historically. Now, a lot of them are pre-World War I Lebel rifles, but hey, they're arms. It's just, and how to make this big and powerful army, but then tactically ineffective. And it's whether, weapons that aren't effective as the German weapons, or and this is a major thing with Germany, and this is another aside, because of the massive levels of disarmament for Germany, including large reparations. Germany actually recollects lots of machine guns, you note, but also a lot of Gewehr 98s from some of the former Allied countries as they march into them, because they had been given out as war reparations, and since they're not the local calibers, large stocks of World War I German ammunition, and these guns were just warehoused, sort of an emergency weapons. If we need, we got 200 rounds, and that's pitiful little per rifle or something like that. And these rifles, so well, let's just stick them all in warehouses. Germany recollects them as they occupy some of these countries like Yugoslavia and Poland, and actually when they move into the Baltic states, they get, because the Soviets had left the weapons there in the warehouses because they didn't want to use them. So Germany recollects weapons that they use for garrisoning troops that are compatible with their caliber. But Germany has had massive amounts of weaponry stripped away from itself, so it doesn't have lots, compared to, say, the French, World War I leftover weaponry. So a lot of their weaponry, by sheer force of need, is new made, and so it's slightly more modern than like a pre-World War I Mauser rifle, which Germany had lots of those before World War I. I'm talking pre the Gewehr 98s that they used as sort of reservist weapons. But a lot of that stuff has been destroyed or turned over to the Allies as part of the end of World War I. But so Germany takes this, or Hitler takes this view that because this has happened to him, it must have happened for a reason, and through his sheer will and his guidance of the superior German people, I'm sort of thinking from his viewpoint, not mine, that he's going to crush and needs to crush, because divine providence, if you will, has put this in his path, and it is meant to be done now and not later, but it is a big mistake. Now, saying all of that, why am I getting ready at this episode here, with a long preamble, to start the war now? Well, as you may have noticed, I think it was last episode, or was it the episode before, we had the 1940 Winter Olympics happen. Well, that's because Germany was at peace, and Garmensch Parkenkakensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensensens is already pre-set up, and that was the planned Winter Olympics, and there was actually posters made for it, although it never happened, just as prototypes. So I had that, so I made that event. Continuing along Germany from this point to say 42 or 43 peacefully really skews things out, because you don't have what Germany or Hitler would have demanded, hey, build the great stadium, it only costs 2 Bismarcks, Now I have a, simple event that just starting development, not costing the cost of 2 Bismarcks, but just starting, makes the idea of groundbreaking and some test buildings and whatnot. But you would be having a lot of other continuing diverted ICs to other needs within Germany other than building up the army. You would, of course, have building up the navy. And although, we can do the 1940 and the 1941 and the 1942 May Day and, Nuremberg rallies and create fantasy posters, or just sort of try to use historical ones, but go in and alter the dates, or I don't know, whatnot. We could do some of those sort of, understood kind of things, and I could randomly do stuff. It just, as a mod developer, it would take a lot of effort to truly make a long-term situation. And you would have how well the other nations are responding to continuing armaments. So it's just impractical to play a game, and it entered my mind when I started this series to try to play to like 42, and just sort of play on fairly fast and not talk too much once we get past all the events, and just rock forward and see what we could get with sort of a really strong what Germany was supposed to be. Because we can look at this, the German army would not have chosen to go to war with primarily Panzer I and Panzer II tanks. That was the great majority of tanks. There might be, I'd have to look at the numbers, and again, as you know, if watch enough, I'm not good at keeping all the numbers ahead. If you put all of the 35Ts, the 38Ts, 35s and 38s, they're okay tanks. They've got 37mm guns. They're 4-man tanks. They're okay. And now with the Panzer IIIs and the Panzer IVs, they're great tanks. Now, these early ones in early 40 are thin armored. Best, the Panzer III has the 37mm gun. The Panzer IVs, even they're bigger, little bit bigger tanks. They still have basically the same thickness of armor as the Panzer IIIs, so they're not like heavy tanks. They're just a bit bigger and have a larger turret ring, and have that short-barreled 75mm gun, designed almost exclusively designed to blow up bunkers. It's meant to be a support tank, and really designed as a sort of infantry tank, or designed to be spread out amongst the infantry in small numbers to deal with whether it's the Maginot Line or other just field fortifications. The idea of they had 5 days out there, and they dug some really good trenches. They had sandbags and lumber and maybe some rocks to give a little bit of hardness, and built, hardened machine gun and, light artillery anti-tank type, field fortifications, positions that are bulletproof and are largely resistant to anything but a direct, right on top of them hit, especially resistant to airburst explosive of artillery, so that, you're sort of protected. The Sturmgewehrs are meant to, have that heavy frontal armor, sort of come up frontally, and in small numbers blow up these little bunkers and things, where the Panzer IV is meant to be a mobile, fast-moving, in conjunction with the Panzer III, but also to blow up those kind of bunker situations, is what it's meant to be. It's actually, its penetrative abilities with the early rounds are not, against proper metal armor, are not that good. It's later on with the shape charges they get really good. But, they're meant to deliver a lot of explosive onto a target to blow it up, going after these field formations. But it is a tank, but it is a support, it's designed at least as a support role tank. Obviously we know it ends up being the best German throughout the war medium tank. The Panther is a obviously a development level beyond it in technology, but it has its own problems. Where the Panzer IV really is because of its sort of long development cycle, is a very reliable vehicle. It's not as quick to build as like the Sherman, but it sort of fills that role once you get either the better ammo for the short barrel gun or the much better longer barrel gun and heavier armor and all of that stuff. It's mechanically reliable and well done, as what we see that growing to be. But it's designed to be a support tank. But maybe if you get all the Panzer IIIs, Panzer IVs, 38Ts, 35T, all of those together, they might equal. You'd have to look at the numbers. The Panzer Is and Twos, and remember the Panzer Is. Well, even the Panzer IIs are really designed to be training tanks. Just sort of like, hey, how do we drive these tanks around in groups? Do we have them in? How many tanks can one person command? Basically, it shows up to be sort of 4, as a platoon. The British want to do 3, but how many can you keep track of in command to the point of, we're going to have 2 platoons, if you're, or 3 or 4 platoons to be, so it's that kind of training. It's just, and it's, partially it's, the driver's training or the gunner's training kind of thing, but it's also the command and organization training tanks. And it's just armed with a machine gun. And sure, I would use every one of them I got in some role at some point during World War II. It could be just late in the war as anti-partisan work. So you got a mobile group of machine guns to move around. I would use them as additional tanks in 1940, but they are not really designed to be combat tanks, and putting them into combat roles is really a sign of weakness. There are 16 mobile divisions, and that includes, I think it's 10 armored and 6 motorized infantry divisions for the invasion of France. That's all there is, and that's all there is on a modern German armed forces at the time of going to war with France. And that clearly shows that German army is not thinking it's going to go to war with a major power. That's thinking we're going to war with Poland, and it works. Okay. So that's the setting of the historical start of the war. It was a gamble by Hitler. Hitler gambled, he lost. What could Hitler have done once he's gone to war and, oh shit, the Allies have declared war? What are they going to do? I don't know that the Hitler government could have stayed in power. Now, had the German military done a coup against the Nazis, I think you could have had a Germany that would have seen the resurrection of Czechoslovakia in some form, whether all of the Sudeten probably a little more sensible borders than what was originally drawn up, but all of the Sudetenland back to Czechoslovakia, I don't know. Poland would have, now I don't know what the Soviets would be doing, but Poland would have been made whole. A few other things like that would have been an interesting thing, but didn't go that way. Okay, so I think we're ready to go here mostly. What we're going to do now is come over here, and we're going to, because I don't want to take the losses, no, we're going to take the losses. Because I'm going to shift a little, but we're going to take we're going to stop these. Romania, Bulgaria, Iran. We're going to stop. That's just too much for too little. I like the idea of these little things getting us better. We're only worrying about imports, not exports at the moment. Some of those will be cut off. Argentina, yeah. We're going to keep the America trade just because they're big trades. And we're going to shift those to the U.S. Now, I would consider, this is sort of a wish fulfillment or something, if I could direct these, and they will be redirected after a certain amount of losses around Britain. But if I could actually plot some of these courses, I would consider keeping some more of them alive longer. But they're just not worth it right now. Okay, Colombia and Ecuador. Now, with all of that going, can we yet? I think I can't, but oh, we can. Okay, so we have our biggest sort of need right now is steel. So let's do another trade agreement for more steel. Okay, that's good. So we're going to let this go for just a little bit to make sure that these paths get shut down. Wait a day or so. You want to get your submarines out and active, which the Germans did before the war started. They did with some of their naval commerce raiders. Let's look again here. Okay, this is just the U.S. Is it raiding? Yes. Okay. So we're going to do that. That, like I say, that will get moved around after some losses or something. But the AI doesn't. I really wish we could. Now, obviously, it's not going to happen in 3. We can't do it in 4. But I wish we could, if we either be able to draw the path or be able to block out sea zones that not to go through. To have that would be really nice if people want to micromanage it. Okay, so we've got that. That's going. Let's Danziger War. I think it is vaguely possible to have the Poles back down, but I don't think it'll happen. Okay, this is a photo of Danzig, but a proper photo from the period would have huge amounts of swastika flags all over Danzig. It was a big, massive Nazi center of support. Okay, so declare war on Poland. It happens. Okay. Okay, we've lost the effects of the Austrian economic miracle, and we got assault guns now. Have advanced. Is that these assault guns? No, that's these down here. Okay, so let's switch over to here, and we will do. Yeah, might as well do anti-air upgrade. Now we have some things we can do, as it says here. Service by requirement and heavy industry emphasis. So we want to do this, which will make up for some degree at least, losing because it's 5% for the Austrian economic miracle. So we want to do that, and we want to do, because we are so low on manpower at this point. Oh, and Germany did not have huge overabundance of manpower either, so nor did it have much steel extra, so we're not that far off from history. So we want to do that, and we want to come over here now that we are at war. Constantine van Roth, which daily dissent changes ruling party support. That's good, but what's really good is that 5% down in peacetime, where there it is. Von Ribbentrop is Reich's foreign minister. He's just foreign minister. Similar titles, or basically the same title, but just want to separate them out a little bit. And he's a little bit more Nazified. National manpower up, which is very good again for this. Money, which is good. Threat impact is heavier, and neutrality change. So that's good now that we're at war. We want to do that. I think that's our current starting wartime cabinet. Now, what other sorts of things? Okay. We want to do wartime measures event. We want to do that. Okay. As you can see, we gain some metal, raw material, manpower, and gain some dissent. we could do no need, but we're going to take the descent. And we're going to do a medium fleet. We're going to take what we can. Now, come down here. I think we'll have, yes, a bunch of these guys. They're no longer giving us the small vessels, the motor torpedo boats and torpedo boats, because we can now build them, so that's fine. That's good. Appreciate that. But I did want to be able to invade Norway at least, so that's very useful. We have, oh, I forgot to do this. The other thing, of course, you can do before you start that is reinforce or call up the reserves, which are happening now. But one thing I do normally forget to do, and I did forget to do, is build a lot of my forces as reserves. Okay, now let's start our combat maneuvering here. Get down to some divisions. Come on. Okay. Do this conscript unit. Yeah, let's move through loads. Okay, that's hitting them fast and fairly hard. Yeah. These guys we're going to swing up and over and around. Some of these we're saving from the attack so that they be able a little more rapidly follow along. Yeah. Make sure we're hitting that from more than one path. Krakow. And we don't have a commander. Oh well. You go in for that. SA Cavalry, maybe not the best choice there, but help out. And make sure they're not just attacking from one province. Now here. Going to hit that. Okay, and yes, I'm not using HQs just at the very first of these allocations. Trying to both drive towards Warsaw as well as cut off Poland in two. As you can see, this cavalry division is just going to be a hapless victim overrun here. You should be attached to somebody. Okay. So should you. Man, I didn't do as maybe good a job as I hoped. Wow, a lot of these guys. But hey, there you go. Okay, and we might as well. Oh, and more. Wow. Why didn't I? Thought I had. Doesn't really matter at this point. They're going to be overrun. Oh, we're going to have a leader here. Skill level. Let's find it. List will do. some SA. Well. These guys we will. We're hitting in from more than one province. Let's come up here. Go light infantry. And then we'll put on the Danzig, just keep it going as fast as possible. Now here we're going to Fausch is going to attack in with his heavy artillery. So maybe overly, unfortunately, too weak. Let's I. The way I'm saying that is because I know the, well, don't necessarily know it by heart, but I've looked at the order of battle of Pulitzer Division at this time, and it is distinctly better than just some military police as their main component. So let's at least temporarily attach you. I was hoping to get the reserve army already, but I guess that's going to happen now that the war is started. Okay. You attack into there. Just because we've got a lot of people here who are going to support that attack. You support that attack. Okay, that looks pretty good. Pretty sort of Poland conquering kind of thing. Now I had talked a little bit with somebody about the idea of lowering the defenses here and trying to keep the main sort of divisions back a little bit and let the French sort of attack and moving them up once they do to try to gain experience and weaken the French. I'm just not going to bother with that. Not that there isn't some useful experience gaining. There is with some of that. Now what we're also going to do here is put up air power. Yes. I like to do interception. I think air superiority works better, but why do I do interception if I think air superiority works better? It comes to sort of fuel usage. If I put them up as interception, they will go up and operate and intercept, or put up as superiority. They'll just operate no matter what's going on. They just fly around, so they burn fuel. But if I have them up here as interception, they will take on what they think are useful targets. And unfortunately, they do sort of end up flying back and back and back to an airbase that has enemy on it, but that aren't necessarily flying anymore. So You might want to check that sometimes if... So I'm trying to keep my fuel usage down. Now obviously I have plenty of fuel, almost maxed out. But still, you don't want to be too wasteful, as later on it could become a real issue. And yes, I'm putting a lot more. Oh no, I want to intercept here. Mostly worrying about over Germany, but a little bit over France is fine. This guy I'm going to put in the west, but I'm going to shift him just to night. Hopefully he'll operate only at night. So if the AI is either through random chance or some sort of planned operation to operate at night, bombing strategically, these guys will come up. They're not as good at dogfighters, but they're should be fairly good at taking on bombers, and for night it should do fairly well. Now, also, we want to come up here and over here. Close escorted. There we go. Get a lot of these guys up here. So anything that sort of thinks about moving up sea here. And here I'm going to intercept. No, intercept. But these have a bit longer range. We will see how they work against anybody who is trying to intercept my naval bombers. Now these guys we're going to start putting out here in the Baltic. To give considerable air cover, if you will, to our naval operations. Okay, well that looks like a pretty good start. What do we have here? Okay, some more fighters. Get them up over Germany, just to make sure the Poles or somebody else doesn't start bombing us. Slow this down a little too fast. Okay, go to good. We've won. So we're basically winning everything here. Well, now that we've won there, well, wide around boats just in case it ends up being a problem battlefield. Because the cities could end up being a bit more of a fight, though there is a victory point there, I believe, so. We are going there as well as bypassing it. Whatever gets us through fastest. Let's go this way. creative different paths. But you want preferably a big enough target, if you will, to hit and take the enemy. Not just lightly or just barely enough on all these other places. Now I want to look at sequence. Okay, we do have that down there. Yeah, how big is this? Just 2. Oh, let's send it. We got a lot going up towards Warsaw. And why catch anybody who's retreating out? Okay, Corps headquarters, you guys come up there. These are good fighting Corps headquarters. Corps headquarters without any support or any other units. Too many. This view here. So they get a little bit of resistance there. Okay. I haven't been using any air power here in the east. I don't think it's really necessary. I got lots of bombers. If I decide to, I will. But, okay, heavy armor designs. Well, good. What's this one? And it's grayed out. Okay. Now that we are here at war, we can do this. We want to do that very much so. Let's look at our production. We've mobilized a bunch. I'm still using this. Well, let's see what. We have some events that will reduce our. If that's Blitzkrieg. Oh yes, all of our auxiliary vessels. We'll put them in here. I'm going to put you operating. That way I won't have to keep going down. Get the one on the bottom. There we go. The US, what do you want? We give them money for rare materials. Sure thing, sure thing. We're doing this with the US because hopefully we can deal with the losses there. Okay, what we're going to do here is go on map, open pop-up window we're going to get rid of. Okay. Still be in the log. It'll still be on the map so we can see what's happening. Ah, French. Heavy bombers are coming after us here. Sort of kind of what I wanted to happen, because I don't want to get torn apart. Interesting where they decided to bomb. Okay, you are intercepting, okay. Well, you know what we can do, just come up to here, Raider Corps F, See if there's anybody that doesn't have an assignment. You don't have an assignment. Okay, so we're gonna go to Central Germany, which is where you are, which is good, and intercept somebody, day or night. And you don't have an order. Okay. If they come after that part of Germany, go for it. Take them down. That's why. We're gonna wait till we get more reinforcements. I don't want them chewed up. Oh. I thought about this. Well, sort of too late now. Maybe I'll make a special episode. Thinking about doing a straw poll. Maybe I'll have done that and release that first. How many days it's going to take. Yeah, I could do that. Go back and make a special. How many days is it going to take episode? No, thank you. To defeat Poland. Thought about doing a straw poll. Okay, now these guys haven't attacked. These guys are moving and winning, so those guys have all won, so let's move you down this way. Are we actually battling somebody? No, I think it's just the Soviets moving around. And the Finns are moving around there as well. Okay. Coming and observing the war. Let's take a quick look at the battle for Danzig here. Okay. We have shore bombardment. I decided to do this not because we need to. But that's sort of what the Schleswig-Holstein did. It was on a port visit to Danzig. Danzig was theoretically a neutral harbor. The Gdynia was the military harbor for Poland. But the Schleswig-Holstein, the sort of coastal battleships, as they're called here, but they're pre-dreadnought battleships, were there. So we do have the shore bombardment helping us out. So we have a river crossing penalty. So yeah, that's sort of cool. We have adjustments there. Okay, medium armor design is improved, which is a good thing in the sense that our armor design is improved. Bad thing is that a lot more upgrading will need to be done. And what else has happened? Light armor upgrade, which I think is yes down here. But we'll shift that one to anti-tank here. And motorized engineers upgrade, which is also down here. How long until we get this? Okay, we have a little less than 23 more battles. Fight. And so soon is the answer, hopefully before France will at least start researching that. We got improved security units. Oh, this looks good. We'll do that. Okay, we still have one from that first one. Oh, machine gun focus. That's sort of a no-brainer. We'll take that one. More. And because we've now mobilized much more of our force, we're back to producing stuff in a bigger way. And continue. Ooh, we're having... a little faster. Not yet. At war with the Soviet Union, having to manage the whole thing. Okay, and what other attacks? Oh, come on. Assault weapons. Those are the engineer ones. Stop that. Motorized cavalry, no, we don't want to have them use fuel. It's a good thing, but we don't want to use fuel. Okay. Fly throughput down, but that... unit cooperation repair rate. Supply transfer cost. Oh, I don't know. This is what we're going to do. We're going to start pushing on some of these guys here because we're going to start with the longest take to research. Pushing ahead with those. There we go. Let's watch the war. Come on. Let's also look. I don't really think we would have seen a pop-up, but any sort of attacks here? No. We're staring down the French. They are not even really thinking about moving against us. No, we're fighting the Polish armor here. Ah, they're wanting to join us. They're wanting to join the winning side. They're doing well. Okay, May 1st. Okay, cruiser anti-aircraft. Anti-aircraft control, or whatever control. Shooting down aircraft got better. And it's grayed out. Well, let's move this to damage control. I'd rather not have ships sunk. Industrial efficiency advanced. Very good, and I think that will be too far ahead, but we're going to shift that over to, well, we're going to do steel production because we are sort of low, but we're building that up. And integrated armored fighting vehicle support, and I think that's under infantry, and that is one and done. And because we've gone to, what is it, service by requirement, a little less leadership, I think. Any important units that we want to deploy now? The aircraft are very useful, but not really going to be used during this campaign here and all. deploy them and figure out before we go into France. Oh, we now have a major victory. We get the bonuses there. Well, let's get some of these guys forward. You don't need to on this short campaign. These guys should be moving forward. Because they're useful. Obviously, they're not needed, but hey. No, I didn't attach those to anybody yet. Papa Hoff will just move you forward to his occupation. Okay, well they're attacking into there. You support that attack. Move forward. Coming there, they're coming down here. No attack into there. Okay, light armored designs have advanced. Very good, which is grayed out. We're going to use that to come up here and... yeah, oil refinery. Sounds good. And we have a little bit more. But another tech. Bolt oil. Pushing ahead on those. We need those. Okay, the Miglia. 1940, that's the 1,000-mile race. It had been interrupted because of a bunch of crashes, I think, in the previous years. But even though the war is going on, they hold the race. The SS sends a car. That's it, black with SS's in on it. So, yep, helps our automotive industry lose little dissent. Good. Commonwealth troops arrive in England. Our agent reports that the 1st Canadian Division was sent to England. We will take care of them on the next battlefield. Okay. Changing Enigma codes, yes. We'll gain a bunch of decryption. Heroic tales, that's finally kicked in. Cost us a bunch of money, but yeah, we knew that was going to happen. Agriculture, since we are at war, the supply of food has become essential. Now, this is another thing I've recently been reading a little bit about in the book. They talked about Germany and its preparations for war within the agricultural industry. They weren't as dictatorial as you might think with the farmers. They were trying, where the British, once the war starts, they become dictatorial with the farmers. Now, through the war ag, it is sort of diffused in that the local war ag people could tell, you know, or sort of ran the local thing. Now, they could tell the local farmers exactly what to plant and where to plant it. But it was sort of, you know, regionally, I want to, you know, look at England, you know, farmers in this region would sort of, you know, say what's going on. And although London, of course, would be putting out overall big quotas, you know, we need more flax, because flax is, you know, used in making all kinds of things. Or we need more wheat, and because during the 1920s and 1930s, Britain imported massive amounts of wheat from other parts of the world. So the wheat prices, it was really hard farming. And this they also talked about in France. It was France during some of the times in the 30s had wonderful bumper years of crops growing wheat and other cereal type grains. And that was just terrible for the farmers because there was just so much of it. It was swimming in it, so the value was very low, and there was political pressure and times to set minimum prices for some of the things. So farming can be a really hard thing to do because you plant for what you think is going to be wanted in the future, but if everybody plants wheat and nobody plants barley, the wheat prices will be plummeted, and you might make no money. And if you've had to borrow money, or you borrowed maybe a long time in the past to buy a tractor or something, and over time you're paying it off, but you have payments to make, and then you go, oops, I can't make the payments, you can lose the farm. So, or other bad things. So even good times with farming can be bad economic times. Then, of course, bad bad farming times can be boom times for farmers that don't have that bad of a situation. Meaning, if half the crops are ruined in France, the other half does really well and makes lots of money if you happen to be that. So it's a very tricky sort of thing. But Britain had moved over very much to a meat economy for its farming, and because they could bring in cheap fodder for the animals from overseas, they could bring in cheap wheat. And that isn't a good thing with you're going to be cut off, because if you are feeding the animals the same food that the humans could eat, you get less food for it by the time you're eating the animal. Now in Britain they ate a lot of mutton, sheep, and since sheep just eat grass, they can be like in the Highlands of Scotland and other places that you can't readily farm or farm effectively. And so you could grow sheep on grass and then eat the sheep, and that works. They did do bacon, or pigs, bacon, sausages, whatever in Britain too, but pigs mostly compete with humans for food. Now Germany was a much bigger percentage of pig eaters. Again, wonder why all of the Muslims want to move to Germany, the land of the pig eaters. Doesn't make sense, but whatever. We're going to see German dietary things change, because in schools they're going to have to start serving halal meals, and so pork and Muslims aren't going to want to be around working in places where they do sell pork and things like this. They're going to have to stop doing that. Yes, it's going to be a big change for the Germans, getting away from pork, finally. Okay, but so Germany had this problem with the idea that they had lots of pigs, and pigs eat the same things often. You can feed them scraps and whatnot, but they generally compete with humans for food. So Germany also had a lot of small farmers. Now this was a problem for the Nazis, because Walter de Rey was one of the founders of the National Socialist ideology. He's basically in charge of German agriculture leading up to the war. But he is a holistic food farmer fanatic, and I would say to the point of mystical holistic food farming. Some of you might disagree with that, but he's the sort of founder of the blood and soil movement. But that's sort of the mystical blood with the mystical soil, that the farmers, the right blood of the farmers farming the land in the proper peasant way. Nazis, I want to say this right, Nazis loved peasants. They were big on peasants. They wanted the German people to be peasants. Where in America we want them to be farmers, and farmers can be this kind of thing. A guy, or there's at least two guys here. One guy towing the tractor. There's three guys. There's one guy up on the combine harvester as well, and then there's a guy in the truck. So farmers can be this sort of bigger production without necessarily being big corporate farms. Though this, of course, may be an incorporation, but it's still, maybe a family farm, or not a huge corporate farm, but a farm that allows effective mechanization. Well, Germany, and they talked about this in France and other places, was largely unmechanized farming, even on small handheld machines. Wartime Farm is a great series. If you want to watch it, it's on, it's a BBC series, I believe, but it's on YouTube, Wartime Farm. And they go into Britain and its wartime farm and what was going on at different stages in the war. I've learned a lot from that series. And a lot of the farm mechanization is literally sort of, stuff that a human walks behind. Is sort of a small engine, like you would say, they have a scale on a motorcycle that you would have on a wheel thing that would then plow a small patch of land. That's for doing small patches of land here and there, as opposed to big combine harvesters. The They had gotten Ford to come in and build or had already had a tractor factory, but before the war even started, they'd convinced Ford to build to increase production, and they were going to have a few thousand tractors just set aside for if the war starts, that the government was sort of going to pay for, and various food things. And it's the Ford Sun tractor, the Fordson tractor, but it's American Ford's. Wasn't the best tractor around, but it was the one around, and it's a wheel tractor and much smaller than this big thing. But the Fordson tractor was the main sort of wheeled tractor for Britain in sheer numbers during the pre-war and war period, and so for Britain it really worked out well. But most of the farming is done on small plots of land in Germany, and so it's very inefficient. And so the Nazis were conflicted about this. They didn't want to go to big industrialized farming because they wanted to do the peasant farmer. And even before the war, they're trying to get Germans to move into the eastern territories of Germany to increase farming in these regions, and just so many of the farmers would not do so. And the SA was heavily involved in this before the war, and then once you get Polish territories, they're trying to get more and more Germans. Sort of a division, I'm sure I'll go into this more later on. To get Germans from Germany to move into not so much the general government part of Poland, but the part that's annexed back, that had been former German Empire, but annexed directly back into Germany. Trying to get Germans to move east is mainly an SA project, where trying to get Germans from Lithuania, Estonia, later, actually Lithuania and Latvia, then later Lithuania, and other, if you will, liberated German colonies that had, as Peter the Great and other Russian czars had convinced Germans to come in and colonize bits and pieces of sort of the south of Russia. These various groups, as well as getting from Romania and Hungary and other places, getting people to move west into Germany from other parts, was mainly an SS driven function, so it's sort of overlapping. Again, the Nazis, Hitler, big on overlapping responsibilities and competing responsibilities. But they're really looking at doing this peasant sort of farming. And yes, they sort of want minor mechanization. They don't want, zero mechanization, but they want this peasant sort of thing, which really sort of hurts the German farm industrialization. But we'll take this. This is a bit, I think, overdone from reality, but 100 manpower, great. Supplies, great. Money, we can afford it. And we'll have 10% more manpower, great. Reich Besieged, National Labor Service. This obviously is the RAD. The RAD was a major element of trying to take land and make it arable, make it grow food, and they were doing that well before the war. This is a reasonably effective program to do this. But this is sort of a post-Hitler youth, before you're going into the army kind of idea, so like 16-year-olds, that you're doing this and you're continuing military training. Not so much, I mean, they did do sort of combat type mock maneuvers in the Hitler Youth, and so they probably did some of that here. But at least from the photographic evidence that I've seen, it looks more like just continuing shooting and, and that kind of minimal military training going on, but doing a lot of sort of outdoor labor primarily, and a lot of it is trying to put land, not so much being farmers, though I'm sure when, planting season or harvesting season in a region where there was RAD personnel, they were out helping with the harvest. I'm sure of that, because you see some photos of it. But from what I understand of it, it was mainly trying to take various bits of land that were either too boggy or too whatever, and do drainage or clear away, sort of natural growth to make it plantable, that kind of things. So they were trying to turn land into being able to be farmed, because it takes a lot more manpower, shall we say, particularly if you're using manpower as opposed to machinery. You know, do you use a tractor to pull out all the bushes, or do you have people coming in first, cutting them down, but then you've got to pull out their roots, and so you've got to some sort of plowing or dragging or whatever to get the, you know, because trees are bigger, but you have, you know, big sort of bush type stuff that are, you know, foliage or whatever you want to, I want to sort of say. You've got to get that those roots out of the ground before you can readily plow and do it, turn it to wheat farming or barley farming or whatever it may be. So there's a lot more labor intensive work if you're just using labor than what it'll take later once it's into a field, even if it's not a level field. But you can grow wheat on a, you know, somewhat of a slope of the mountain, not, you know, or maybe I should state that somewhat slope of a hill that isn't too rocky, but it could also be getting rocks out of the fields. You know, in Ireland you see all those rock walls because they're getting the rocks out of the fields and making walls out of them just to clear out the stuff. So once you sort of get it to being able to be farmed, you can use a lot less personnel. But also, the RAD is mobilized in the Polish campaign, in the French campaign, in the Soviet campaign, as again 16 to 18-year-old types before they've gone into the army. As the war goes on, they get more and more armed, but early on they're out there without any arms, but they're following along behind the soldiers, repairing a bridge, repairing a road, whatever it might be. I don't know if the enemy's torn down telephone poles to reconnect up so you can use the telephone system, or whatever it might be, labor to facilitate the advance of the army. So the RAD is operating as a paramilitary, you know, semi-military type force, and so we can decide to increase the RAD or increase the RAD's preparation, or no, we want more RAD. Okay, Verdunkeln. This is darken, the enemy sees your lights, is what that says. This is one of the posters, is light, obviously. There were similar things in Britain and other places. Convoy raiders, yes, we want those. Don't waste coal. Been waiting for this. Okay, good. Not right now. So this reduces that by 1. Not right now. Thanks. Okay. What's going to be the cost? 5% until June 1. May 1. 5% armored trains. Okay, this is a lot of armored trains, so we're going to take this, I think. Thinking of the SS Athena. This was a... the captain claims that sunk the ship, claims that it was a, that he thought it was a troop ship because it was zigzagging. Yeah, right. It had all its lights on. It was unescorted at night. It was the first day of the war. He may have thought that, but this is really bad, disastrous. The Germans, of course, propaganda put all the weight behind it. Oh, it's good. We, you know, good strike against Britain or whatever, but it's really a disaster, and it brings the U.S. into worse relations with us, and not good, because you want to keep the U.S. out as long as possible. Introduce Goring's compilation. Gorner, not Goring. I'm just Gorner's compilation to our submarine commanders. Naval expert Eric Groner produced the 1930s compilation of maritime forces of almost all navies in the world. Okay, so this is sort of like a Jane's. He introduced systematic signatures as an easy and effective way to recognize naval vessels by silhouette. So they should have had one of this and looked up to see that it was the Athena and it was not a ship to be sunk. So they had the books, and they also, which basically transferring Lloyd's Register's commercials to a schematic. Yes, I think of that as Jane. Jane's is the other one. So yes, we'll take that. Pair 2 flat cores for Fall Gelb. Yes, we'll do that. Franco, again, this is, I believe, a beta event, so that's why there's no... I did push. Once he offered, I did push after a few days. Revolverheld to get it, so this is no bad reflection on him. He's just getting the good events for this playthrough so that you can enjoy them, I presume, and I hope by the time you get to play it, you'll have nice images. Okay, during the early stages of the Winter War. Okay, again, this needs a check for revolverheld to see that the Winter War is happening. So we won't read too much more into that, but this is happening. Franco-British intervention plans during the early stages, yes. We need more experience, money, supplies. Okay. Well, we're going to take this opportunity to end the episode here. I want to thank you all for watching. I want to thank you for liking the videos. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Love to see you around more often. And, of course, please post questions, comments, corrections, suggestions, ideas. Uh-oh. I didn't know that Slovakia actually entered the war and is being attacked. Attack. I was intentionally keeping them out of the war. Has Romania entered the war? Yes, I know. I was... Oh, well, now they are at war with Finland. Okay. And at war with Poland. Where they weren't before. Okay, so I don't know about that a revolver held, just because I didn't know that the war had started. I know it hadn't started on the other events, but now that the war has started, that event sending aid is more of an acceptable thing happening. Okay, and Hungary is an Axis member. We're going to call to arms so that it will help out with Poland and defend Slovakia a little bit more. Okay, I know we've ended this. So, we'll see you next time for more Hearts of Iron.